Well, welcome, and I better open the hearing first. This is the November 30th budget hearing for the Delaware County Board of Commissioners, and we are going to hear from Judge Fuller, and he will introduce his staff, and this is the Domestic Relations Court budget that we will be considering today. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And this has nothing to do with the budget hearing, but I saw Dawn walk in. I just want to say her office has been great to work with as far as the HR. If we ever have any issues or anything, she is always fantastic to work with. Nothing to do with the budget, but I just saw her and I don't know if I've had a chance to tell you that she's helped us several times this year.
Thank you.
It's hard for me to believe that 6 years ago, I was standing before you as judge-elect, so much has happened for the Domestic Relations Court in the last 6 years. A lot of growth, a lot of changes, but time has gone so very fast. We've had a lot of successes at the court. I want to touch on a couple of those before I get into the budget issues. The first is we have an excellent staff. Our team is absolutely fantastic. They've risen to every challenge that I put before them. I don't know if you recall, but I became judge. It wasn't 11 months until the courthouse was built. So I had staffing spread out in different locations, and when we had our first Christmas party, a lot of people didn't even know each other. I mean, we'd only been in office together for a couple of weeks at that point. And ever since, and everything we've asked them to do, everything that that's happened from inheriting a lot of old cases, clearing out the backlog of cases, to when the pandemic hit, we pretty much overnight shifted to, everything was brick and mortar. Every signature had to be original blue ink, to now we can do everything virtually and remotely. The only thing we need is the electricity and the computers on at the courthouse, and we can conduct hearings and do everything we need to do remotely from not even at the courthouse. I'm a big believer in in-person hearings, but we've heard a lot of comments from the public, from attorneys, that shorter hearings is much better, more efficient for us to continue using the Zoom video conferences. So all disillusions, we use Zooms, most of our status conferences. So we made a lot of technological gains during the pandemic. The staff was absolutely brilliant in how they figured out to do everything. The other thing I want to talk about briefly is some of the programs we've created at the Domestic Relations Court. That's been a major focus of mine. After we eliminated the backlog of cases, I wanted to find out better ways that we can resolve families' disputes. So I'm just going to touch on 3 of them real quickly, and it does tie into the budget hearing, I assure you. First, Settlement Week. This is one program, is the first program we created here. It's been very successful. We've started off bringing in private mediators, some of the best mediators in Central Ohio, to help resolve these cases. We've seen a very good success rate. There's 2 ways I can tell you that, or show you that we have been very successful with our Settlement Week. The first one, when we were first conducting our first Settlement Week, we had a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails from attorneys. I don't want to do this. Do I have to do this? Those same attorneys are now saying, I want my cases in the Settlement Week. So that's been a very positive change. Additionally, Franklin County has just completed their 3rd Settlement Week. They saw how successful, and we're hearing how successful our program was, and they copied us, and that's always one of the best forms of flattery. And other counties from around the state are also looking at doing Settlement Weeks. The second program, I should have introduced him at the very beginning, but if you don't know, Larry McQueen is here. He is my court administrator, and he also heads up my neutral evaluation program. Larry has done a lot of great work on the neutral evaluation program. Real quick, it is a program where Larry serves as a neutral, and we have 1 other panel member serve as a neutral. The people present their side of the case, usually in like 15-minute to 20-minute chunk of time. And then Larry, along with the other neutral person, if it's a custody case, it's a mental health worker. If it's a financial case, we've used a forensic accountant, where they'll discuss what the issues are and then report back to the people with suggestions or recommendations about settling their cases. We're seeing, I didn't look at the numbers before coming over here. I think we're around 80 or 90% full settlement on cases that go through the neutral evaluation process. And it's something that I think is going to be very beneficial leading forward. The final program I want to talk about is co-parent coaching. Co-parent coaching Like Settle a Week, no other DR court in Ohio was doing this when we started it. With co-parent coaching, there's no other court in Ohio doing it, and I don't know if there's one anywhere in the United States. But we have a LISW who works with the families and coach them into how to create a new co-parent relationship. A lot of our families are going from a romantic relationship to a non-romantic co-parent relationship. There's usually a lot of stress, a lot of difficulties in the midst there. I'm sure you can understand that. And she really works with them to coach them up. This program's only been going on almost 2 years now. And we've been accumulating data on it, and what we're showing is it is doing a good job of reducing conflict and increasing communication skills, which is an environment that will help the children when they're going through this, help them not only survive, but be able to thrive in a better environment. I bring this all up at the budget hearing for 2 reasons. One, every time I talk about my court, I talk about these hearings, or these programs, because they are really good, and I'm really proud of them. The staff has done a great job with them. But the reason why I think it's important to bring up today is we're trying to do these, number one, because it's best for the families to try to resolve their own conflicts, but number 2, because it's a cost savings for the county. If we can get a case to resolve in mediation and neutral evaluation or co-parent coaching, that is a huge savings for the county, because if that case doesn't settle, then it goes to trial. And if it goes to trial, we're talking about lengthy trials here. I'll discuss this a little bit later, but in Delaware County, we are very fortunate that we have a good family median income. We have higher income than around the state. We have more assets as far as families are concerned than typically around the state, and that leads to more litigation. So if we can settle the case in 3 hours with neutral evaluation or 5 hours with neutral evaluation, as opposed to having a 3, 4, or 5 day trial on it, which is going to take me or my staff 5 to 10 or 15 days to write it, it is a huge savings for the court and for the county. Now, as you're all aware, our budget does have a increase in personnel. I'll talk a little bit about the stats behind that here in a minute, but we're in need of additional magistrate. We also need a support person for that magistrate. Kind of goes hand in hand. If you hire a magistrate without a support person, it's not really utilizing the magistrate as much as they could be in working on the cases. And finally, we need another additional administrative assistant for me. I hope these are not coming to us as a surprise to you. This is something that we've tried to telegraph over the last couple of years, that this was going to be a need, and something that we put off on until now. As a brief history, I think you'll remember 6 years ago we worked quite a bit. I know back then I was working with Farzan and Sai, and I think Don was helping out too, was trying to put together a budget that we could all agree on. I think we were a little bit apart from what we first initially thought each position should be. But one of the great things about Delaware County is that we worked together and we found a solution. And we came up with a solution. It was less than what I wanted, but we've made do with it. And Commissioner Merrill, I think it was your suggestion, or Commissioner Bennett, may have been you at the hearing. My first year, you had suggested that we grow slowly and plan and hire for future needs. That was my intent to begin with. I appreciated the comment, and that's exactly what we have done. We have not, the first year I was in office, we didn't spend a lot of our budget, partly because the courthouse hadn't been completed, but partly because we were identifying where we needed to grow so that we could grow smartly. One of the things that's important to remember, because there is a misconception in the legal community, and I'm not sure if you guys have thought much about it, but when I became judge, or before I became judge, in 2016, there were 5 domestic relations magistrates. We still have 5 domestic relations magistrates. If you go back 10 years, we had 5 domestic relations magistrates. So there has not been an increase. While you certainly see an increase in the budget because of my position and other positions in the domestic relations court, as you'll see with the cases going up, we have not had any increase in domestic relations magistrates, and that's why we need an additional magistrate at this time. So our stats, every case year, or almost every year, the cases are different. There's no way to predict how many divorces we'll have next year, how many custody disputes we'll have next year, but there are certainly trend lines. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, just a general, overall, big picture, what's going on with the court docket. I usually say that we have about 2,400 cases a year. That's not quite right. Last year was 2,326. I always say 2,400 just because that's 200 a month. Easy to remember, easy to put to keep straight in my head. But we had roughly 2,326 cases last year. That is up. I'm comparing 2017, the first year I became judge, to 2021, which is the last year we have full year-end stats. So using those numbers, we were up 6%, 5.8%, 6% over that 5-year period. And that I know doesn't sound like a huge amount, but that's only telling half the story. The other side of the story is our biggest case type, as far as number of cases, is called G by the Ohio Supreme Court. They're support cases. You'd probably recognize them more as CSEA cases. There are a few other cases involved in that, but by far CSEA is the biggest chunk of our docket. It's roughly about half. Now, their cases have gone down, so it's not quite half anymore. But I bring this up because this child support enforcement agency cases, the child support cases, are very, very important. But from a court management, court resources point of view, they take a lot less time. As an example, CSEA case filing, may not need a hearing, or if it needs a hearing, usually we schedule those hearings for 15 minutes to half hour. Compare that to a divorce where we're scheduling for 3 or 4 days. I mean, CSEA cases just do not take as much court resources as the other sort of cases. So what you see is our overall cases are going up. Our CSEA cases are going down, which means all other case types are going up. Not necessarily every year, but it just makes sense. If your largest case type, half your cases are going down, overall your cases are going up. Every other sort of case type we have, which is divorce, dissolution, custody, paternity, and other, all those other cases are going up, and those are create a lot more demand on the court as far as time, as far as resources, than the CSEA cases, which are going down. And I want to highlight just 2 of the case types that we have that we've seen some of the biggest increases in the last 5 years. The first one, and most troubling, is DVCPO. That's a domestic violence civil protection order. So if a person who has experienced domestic violence, they can come to the court and request a civil protection order. The protection order can do many, many things, but most people think of it as a no contact order. It says you can't have any contact with the other person. It could say you can't come in so many feet of the other person. It could remove a person from their residence. It can set up custody visitation orders. It can do a whole host of things. But what I'm bringing up now is because it's the most disruptive case we have in our docket. And I say that not as a criticism, not as a negative. It's just a fact as far as what it does for our docket. It's very important that we have access to the court system for people that have experienced domestic violence. That's something that's very necessary. So I'm not at all being critical of the process. But from a court resources standpoint, if somebody wants to file a CPO, they walk to the clerk's office, they process their paperwork, they walk up to the domestic relations court, and they get a hearing. Now that hearing may be in 30 minutes, maybe an hour. We try to get them as quick as possible, but it is considered an emergency hearing that we must hear immediately. And so whatever's going on, we kind of have to hit pause and hear those cases. And then if we grant the civil protection order, we have to have a full trial scheduled within 7 to 10 days. In your world, I'm not sure if 7 or 10 days is fast. In the domestic relations world, that's lightning speed. A lot of times we may have schedule a case out much farther than that. But so you can, I think you can understand that by the filing, disrupting the docket, to having and not only just having the hearing, we have to make a decision on the filing of the CPO. And we like to do that as soon as possible that day, so that the person can leave the court usually with an order in hand. And then scheduling it in 7 to 10 days for a full day hearing really affects the court docket. We've seen a significant increase in the request for civil protection orders in the last 5 years. I'm sure you've already read this because you read every article I write in the Gazette, but we're up 54% over the last 5 years. That's very troubling, that's very concerning. We started working more over the last couple of years with Turning Point to try to find ways to help victims of domestic violence, but that 54% increase is having a significant impact on our dockets. The other case type I want to talk about briefly is divorces. That's what most people think of when they think of domestic relations court. We do divorces. And as I said earlier, in Delaware County, when I was doing the research 6 years ago when we were going back and forth as far as the budget, and I looked at what our median household income was, I was amazed. And when I didn't look at it this time, but I know from just being at different meetings what it is now, it's only gone up, up, up. But that really drives more litigation in our cases because when you have assets, when you have income, a high income, you can afford attorneys and you can continue to litigate your case. So that's really driving our court's dockets. And we've seen a significant increase in divorces. Divorces have increased from 2017 to 2021, 37% for divorces with kids. For divorces without kids, they're up 35%. So these are significant increases on cases that take a considerable amount of time each case. Like I said, if it goes to trial, these cases, I would say typically take 2 to 5 days, probably 3 to 4 being pretty accurate on a lot of these. I had a case, it was last year, that they were projecting if it went to trial, it'd be 2 months. I mean, it was just a large asset case, and it would just destroyed our document, and we have to do what we have to do. What I'm trying to illustrate is the need is there for the increase in staff. My magistrates have a high caseload. Their dockets seem overwhelming at times. A lot of times we're not able to schedule cases out for trial for 6, 7, 8 months. Quite frankly, that's longer than it should be in most cases. Some cases require it just because of the complexity of it and investigation that needs to go on. But my magistrates are routinely telling me how far they're scheduling out cases. And there's no way we can get them in sooner because other cases are already scheduled in that time period. So it is, again, very much necessary and reasonable for us to expand our staffing and to bring in an additional magistrate. I do want to say just in conclusion that overall, when you look at the different years, the numbers fluctuate here and there by different case type, and every year it's a little different. But overall is what I'd like you to focus on is increased cases, decrease of child support cases, which means there's a lot of growth there in between, showing all other case types that are expanding in Delaware County. Those case types are much more time consuming than the CSCA type of cases. I want to thank you very much and be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Kind of an observation to kind of reinforce what you're talking about. Back when, and I thought it was fairly tough. You're not, I think you agree. But one of the issues at that time was the backlog of cases. I think, and I'm doing this from memory, a year and a half, does that sound, as far as the backlog, does that sound?
Not that it's brained or seared in my brain. We had 89 cases that were pending, a total of 14,495 days. That is roughly 40 years of backlog of cases. Some of them were up to several years after. The Supreme Court gives you, like for a divorce, a year and a half to conclude it. So that was after that year and a half will run. Some were 1 or 2 or 3 years.
But my point was some catching up to do.
Yes.
A lot of catching up to do. So I really want to compliment you on doing that. And this is an obvious question. I think you've answered it. But once you caught up in a theoretical world, you would need less staff. But you're telling me the growth since then has more than made up for that. Is that an accurate statement?
It is. Yeah, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into. We were robbing Peter to pay Paul a lot in the first year and a half to 2 years. Judge Himnowski was very generous in offering staff to continue wrapping up their cases. So if you'll recall, then Magistrate Schindling and Magistrate Childs was hearing domestic relations cases. Magistrate Schindling has since gone into private practice. Magistrate Child is still with the court. So Judge Himnowski allowed them to continue those cases, continue working on those cases and concluding those cases, which also helped. So we kind of had a few extra hands on deck for a period of time. But yes, I mean, you would think, get caught up, take a deep breath, be able to move forward. And we did that a little bit. for a year or two, but with the pandemic and everything, we didn't shut down, as you might hear about horror stories in other counties of backlog of cases. Because of that, we didn't, because we were able to use technology to keep moving forward. But yes, it's the growth of cases, and cases are being litigated more. And I don't know if that's because of, there's probably a bunch of different reasons, but increasing income and increasing assets is part of it.
One last question, I'm done, and I thought you had a fantastic presentation. This magistrate that you're going to hire, which will result as a staff member as well, is that scheduled for January 1? Is that how it's reflected in the budget, or do you see it sometime during the year?
It's reflected in the budget January 1. It won't be January 1. It will be later in the year, just because, I mean, any attorney we're going to hire is going to have to give notice. We haven't put out a posting yet. If I'd have to look at Larry, because Larry does everything HR and knows the stuff there. My guess is it would probably be first quarter,
If we
end
can
of
find
first
them.
quarter, beginning of second quarter timeframe.
It won't be a big dollar figure, but I would suggest that we maybe put it on the budget like for April 1st or something like that. Is that fair?
Not that I think that's fair.
And that would apply to the staff member as
Yeah.
well. That's all I have. Well done.
Yeah, just a couple questions. Thank you, Judge. Thanks, Larry, again. The staffing that you have now, how many vacancies do you have currently?
Right now, and you know, I've got to cheat and look over to Larry. Right now, we have a magistrate's position open, and we have a admin position open.
Okay. Is that,
Yeah.
that's accurate? Okay. Yeah, and again, most offices and departments are struggling with getting full staff, so I was just
Yeah.
curious where.
That's not by choice.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Second question is, the charges you charge, the fees you charge for the services that you provide, you know, is that mandated by the state, or is that set locally? How does that work?
Two things. Number one, and I don't know why this is. It's one of those, it's always been done this way, and I've never looked into it. Like, we don't get the court costs that we charge. The clerk of court's office gets that. So we do the, like I said. we
You do the work,
and
and they
that's
get
all
the
money.
money.
I don't get it.
So there's no incentive.
No, and that's just the way it's always been. I mean, but the only revenue you see on our spreadsheet or budget is money we collect from the CSEA for doing what's called 4D. I don't know if you have those in other presentations. But they compensate us for some of the magistrate time and some of the staff time working on child support related cases. And so that's the only revenue you see. You don't see any revenue in our
Okay.
budget for our court costs.
So we need to talk to Natalie about
Don't tell her I said that.
Don't tell anybody.
it.
Do you determine those costs, or does she, or is it set up with the
It's
state?
both. There is a statute that says where costs go. I have 4 special funds, which I set the cost on. The money she receives is set by statute.
So is the 4 funds that you set the cost on, does that amount to much in the way of dollars?
One fund does, because it hasn't been touched. Well, it's been touched very little. When I became judge, and please don't quote me on this number, Judge Krieger had this fund running for, I want to say, 10 years, and had never spent any money out of it. So it's the accumulation of, like, right now, 15 years, and that does have a sizable amount in it. The other funds, no. I think one has 12,000. Several have tens of thousands, but not
Okay.
huge amounts. And they're set aside for payment of guardian ad litem fees, and for the other special projects, I believe, is for dispute resolution.
Yeah, the reason I brought it up is we're trying to get the offices and departments to review their fees, because virtually everyone's costs are going up, and we just want to make sure we're covering our costs as we should.
Yeah.
But not make a profit, but cover our costs. So again, great explanation of what's going on in the court. Interesting, very interesting dynamics. So again, appreciate the explanation. That's all I got.
Did you say then that you are short, you have no magistrates right
Oh,
now?
no, we have 5 magistrates.
You've got
Yeah,
5,
you have the
okay,
same
but
number
you're
of lawyers.
short one
One opening.
One administrative assistant
and one ad.
and one
Person.
mediator.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. All righty. Yep, thank you very
you very
much,
much.
appreciate
I
it.
always love talking about the domestic relations.
And
Board.
Okay.
There you were very talkative.
Yeah.
This is the best presentation style you can
Yes,
get right
thank
here.
you. Yeah, thank you, Larry.
And-
Thank you.
well-
Thank
well
you,
done,
Judge.
Judge. And thank you for helping others.
No problem. Thank you.
And we are now recessed until 3 p.m.